If any fan artists are taking commissions, you will be hearing from me. Count on it. Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing well. My name is Emily and welcome to another episode of If the Slipper Fits, the series dedicated to discussing and reviewing just about any version of the Cinderella fairy tale that I can get my hands on. Today we're taking a look at the Cinderella episode from Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater. I wasn't very familiar with this show prior to watching it for this video, and now I've seen a handful of episodes and it is definitely interesting. For those of you who are also unfamiliar, this is an anthology series executive produced by Shelley Duvall, who you probably recognize from The Shining. And episodes were released sporadically throughout its run from 1982 to 1987, with the episode we're discussing today first airing in 85. The episodes all featured notable actors. Duvall herself actually had a couple of roles, with notable writers and directors working behind the scenes. The Cinderella episode is no exception. We have Jennifer Beals in the title role, Matthew Broderick as the prince, Jean Stapleton as the fairy godmother. I was also unfamiliar with her before this, but apparently she had a prominent role on All in the Family. And as the stepmother,
Arden. Thanks.
From what I gather, the show seems to be mostly targeted at families. The stories are still accessible enough for children, but it's not so dumbed down that the parents also can appreciate them, and they will also be more familiar with the actors. However, after watching a few episodes, I have to say there's a few moments just here and there that just make me go, what?
You're very beautiful in your own bitchy way. And ladies, love wood.
Did I tell you about my horse?
No.
Oh, my horse? My horse has this lightning fetish.
Lightning fetish.
I didn't notice anything like that for Cinderella, though. As before, we'll start with a quick synopsis of the episode, and then we'll go back and dive deeper to discuss what worked and what maybe didn't. The narrator gives us a very brief introduction, telling us Cinderella lives with her father, stepmother, and stepsisters, and that she hasn't had much of a problem with it thus far. Then the family immediately receives notice of the father's death and goes into mourning. After the funeral, the stepmother instructs that there will be some changes to the responsibilities of the house, aka putting all of the hard work on Cinderella while making sure that her own daughters stay relaxed and attractive to potential suitors. Cinderella tries to tell her stepmother that this isn't exactly fair, but the stepmother basically tells her she should be thankful she's not getting thrown out in the street. So this arrangement goes on for a while, and eventually Cinderella demands to know why her stepfamily is so horrible when she keeps trying to be nice to them. To which her stepmother explains that since Cinderella has been unfairly blessed with beauty and kindness, their being mean to her balances the scales, as it were. The prince's messenger arrives with an invitation to the upcoming ball, and Cinderella is put to work making the ladies' dresses. The stepsisters tease her about someone like her going to the ball, asking who would want her there anyway. After the ladies leave, Cinderella is visited by her fairy godmother, who says that she will help her go to the ball. With a little bit of thinking, they find a pumpkin to turn into a coach, mice to turn into horses, and a rat to turn into a coachman. The godmother also transforms her dress and gives her the glass slippers, but tells her before she leaves that the magic will run out by midnight. Cinderella immediately catches everyone's attention when she arrives at the ball, including the prince, who asks her to dance and makes conversation with her the rest of the evening. But once it's close to midnight, she abruptly runs off and gets back home just in time. She gushes to the fairy godmother about how wonderful a time she had before her stepfamily returns. They tell her the prince seemed very upset when the mystery princess ran off. The prince laments about his being in love to the king, who gives him the idea to have another ball so Cinderella will show up again. Cinderella asks for her fairy godmother's help again, preparing everything in advance and getting another beautiful dress this night. She and the prince again spend the whole night together, eventually talking about how they might be in love with each other and kissing out by the fountain. But the clock strikes 12 and she has to run off again. She loses one of her glass slippers and the magic wears off just as she leaves. leaves. The prince tries to figure out which way she went, but only finds her slipper. Since there's no other information to go on, the king suggests the prince go searching for the girl whose foot fits the slipper. They eventually turn up at Cinderella's house, where they try it on both the stepsisters, before Cinderella suggests that it might fit her, which of course it does, and she and the prince are reunited. The godmother then shows up, turning the stepmother and stepsisters into rabbits, and gives Cinderella back her beautiful dress. That's when the prince figures out why she had to run off in the first place. We leave knowing that Cinderella and the prince plan to be married, and that they live happily ever after. Shelley Duvall actually did an intro for each episode in the series, and this one I thought was pretty cute.
But this lucky girl rises from the ashes to discover she only needs to be herself to find true happiness. And a prince.
I love that she just throws the prince in at the end, because we all know that the real prize is getting a life away from her terrible family, and the prince is just a pretty bonus. Jennifer Beals is a lovely Cinderella. Her performance is very down-to-earth, very subtle at times. You get the sense she's a little naive, but it works. And she's definitely not trying to do that, oh, I'm a princess thing, which can get grating kind of quickly. Ultimately, she's just a girl, and I think that's a great thing to emphasize. There's actually this little monologue that she has when she comes home from the second ball and she's trying to talk to the godmother.
It's not fair. It's all just a cruel joke. I wish there had never been any magic, and I wish you had never come here. Because then I would never have known what I was missing.
And I really wasn't expecting something like that, but it does make sense in its way. After you have these people going out of their way to tell you that you're not important and nobody will want you, you might have a hard time trying to tell yourself that they're wrong. And now she's seen this glimpse of a future that she could have, but because of the way things are, she doesn't think that she'll be able to actually get it. So she has this moment to break down. This isn't necessarily where I expected the emotional low point to be, but they make a great argument for it, and Beals did a great job. I am not gonna lie, I wasn't into Jean Stapleton's fairy godmother at first blush. Her first few lines gave me the impression that she would be kind of flip.
Well, you know, it's just that I wish that you would have been there when my stepsisters tied me to the
Look,
banister.
do you want to go to the ball or sit here all night chewing the fat?
She also seems weirdly expectant of Cinderella to suggest ideas for things that she can transform. And I'm like, lady, cut the girl some slack. She's never done this before. But those thoughts quickly dissolved, and she actually ended up growing on me a lot. She's definitely got the mother part of fairy godmother down, which can't be said for a lot of other portrayals. She has this thing of pulling these little jokes on Cinderella and trying to psych her out and make her smile. And Cinderella actually gets one back on her, which is all very cute. It really communicates how these two are way more of a family than what's left of Cinderella's actual family. The godmother also makes a point to scoop out the pumpkin before transforming it, which is actually a bit from Charles Perrault's story. I was really amused that they included it.
Well, don't you have to say some magic words or something?
Honey, I'm way beyond that.
That felt like a bit of a dig, I'm not gonna lie. Overall, she's precious, and she understands her role really well. Like, she just gets it.
Oh, and I owe it all to you.
Rubbish! You did it all yourself. Well, the cake was already made. All I did was add the frosting.
Though my favorite moment is definitely toward the end of the episode where the prince asks if she'll be staying for the wedding.
Honey, who do you think's gonna give away the bride?
Not only is that idea thematically appropriate because she is the family that Cinderella actually needs, but it's also just freaking adorable. Now all I can think about is Disney's fairy godmother walking her Cinderella down the aisle at her wedding. If any fan artists are taking commissions, you will be hearing from me. Count on it. By contrast, I was honestly expecting more from Eve Arden as the stepmother.
You kiss up to us, we despise you, and everybody is happy.
She does fine. She serves her purpose, but I don't know, when I saw her name in the opening credits, I immediately thought of her role in Mildred Pierce and just what a queen of dry sass she was. Definitely my favorite part of that whole film.
What's that?
Little $1,800 birthday present for Miss Vida.
Oh, the card. It's here. Where is it?
It's that shiny thing, a block and a half long.
Do you think she'll like it?
If she doesn't, she ought to have her head examined for holes. Here, you have to sign this in blood.
And I know that these two things are 40 years apart, but I felt her stepmother performance was kind of tame, all things considered. She definitely has this very uppity attitude, but her delivery just seems to stay there the whole time. I would have loved for her to go even more dramatic or echo back to her Mildred Pierce role and just go completely dry, but she seems to kind of land in the middle and it doesn't really stand out for me. The stepsisters are also just very there. They're named Arlene and Bertha in this adaptation, and neither one has a terribly distinct personality. I mean, unless you count these 10 seconds at the ball where Arlene is the stereotypical hungry one. And they're definitely good at being annoying, but not necessarily where it comes across as funny, which I think is what the director was aiming for. There's actually a bit toward the beginning where an old school friend of Cinderella's drops by to see her, bringing flowers for some reason. And my immediate thought was, oh God, are they going to try to shoehorn a love triangle into this thing? But it's actually just another excuse for the stepsisters to be terrible. They tell the guy that Cinderella straight up died, then tell Cinderella that he actually hates her and came to ask Bertha on a date. Nobody dwells on it, so it's clearly played for laughs, but it's honestly kind of ruthless. Surprisingly, they don't seem jealous that the prince has devoted his attention to someone else at the ball, at least not that they show. Instead, they want to become very chummy with this mystery princess so they can hobnob with her and the prince. It is a nice change of pace, but of course it only lasts for so long because they still try on the slipper at the end, hoping one of them will get to marry him. I want to shift gears and talk about the visuals for a second. I do rather like the look of the coach. They didn't try to go for the pumpkin look, and it's definitely not the most weather safe, but it does have a distinct ride through the park on prom night vibe, and I can appreciate that. What I'm less impressed by is this dress. Not that it's not pretty, but it's alarmingly similar to the fairy godmother's dress, so it doesn't necessarily feel all that special. They look like they're going to a royal family reunion and they all have to wear the same color so they know they're related. The second dress, as it should be, is far superior. It feels more unique and glamorous, the fabric has more movement, and the gloves are a welcome addition. I also think this headpiece with the ribbons feels much more youthful. In general, I think the costumes are supposed to be vaguely historical without trying to set it in a specific era, and for the most part, I would say it succeeds. The stepmother and stepsister's hair, however, is definitely giving me like early 1800s poodle style energy. That era of fashion has never been one that's particularly appealed to me, and I feel strangely validated. If you watched the previous episode that I did on the Charles Perrault story, you'll remember that I was a bit confused and frustrated when it came to the lack of explanation in regards to the fairy godmother. Well, this one shows up and immediately starts dropping some lore.
You know I have a fairy godmother.
Oh, most people don't. You see, we keep a very low profile, and we're very selective about when and where we offer assistance.
However, the godmother gives Cinderella the slippers, clearly not transforming them from her old shoes, but she makes a point just a minute before about how apparently her magic only works by turning one thing into another. She can't just conjure something. So what is the truth? Matthew Broderick's prince actually gets a name in this version as well. It's Henry. You know, I think I'm going to start keeping track of all of the different names that we get for the prince and the stepsisters, because I know that we're going to get a few and they are all going to be wildly different. So for the stepsisters, we've already got Javotte, Charlotte, Arlene, and Bertha, and Henry for the prince. And this prince is just such a weird little guy. I don't know if it was the directing or Broderick in particular, but he just has so many little moments that make me crack up, and I'm not even sure if half of them were intentional. He's delightfully awkward when Cinderella first shows up, which I always appreciate.
Are you all right?
Oh. You wouldn't want to dance, would you?
I wouldn't?
I didn't think so.
I mean, yes, of course. I'd love to. Thank you.
He's a little self-deprecating, never 100% confident that Cinderella reciprocates his feelings until the end. And he's got the classic, I'm tired of everybody knowing who I am, celebrity baggage. Because of this, they do throw in the trope of Cinderella not knowing that she's flirting with the prince, which is one of my personal favorites. But they also immediately nip it in the bud.
But of course, it's hard to stay anonymous when your face is on all the money.
It's a nice face.
The initial dancing scene is nothing too special. It's very stiff, and it kind of feels like two kids in ballroom dancing class who are just doing co-ed dancing for the first time. The camera is doing most of the heavy lifting here. But the fairy godmother apparently does nails as well. Look at that shine. Also, Cinderella gets hit on by a drunk guy, because that's exactly what this story needed.
Can I help you?
Nah. Oh, she's with you. Oh, I didn't know.
Disappear, Alfred.
That may be the best line in this entire episode. Just impeccable delivery. 5 stars. I do think that he and Jennifer Beals are pretty cute together in that awkward teenager way, and I also like how the script tries to explain their fast romance. It's not necessarily an overwhelming aesthetic attraction. Cinderella actually describes it as the two of them being comfortable with each other, which I think is a lovely way to put it. I think love at first sight is a big oversimplification, but with the right clues, you can definitely get a feeling for how you gel with a person very quickly.
One more time. So sad. Live dangerously.
This guy, I can't with this guy. I can't. The weirdest character award in this adaptation, though, definitely goes to the king.
She was the most wonderful creature that ever walked the face of the earth.
Let me tell you something about women, son. They're different from men.
Should I thank you or slap you? He's just strange, and not in the cute way that Broderick is. Very low energy, mildly disinterested in basically everything. He tells the prince to hold off on the second ball until the next week because he's tired, even though they use the same decorations, so story-wise, what's the point? I really have no idea why they included him in the first place, other than giving the prince some motivation to actually pursue his crush because apparently he's too much of a wimp otherwise. However, the prince does manage to grow a spine at the best possible moment.
What's so funny?
Well, it's just Cinderella. She's nothing but a nothing.
Madam, it takes one, as they say, to know one.
Scratch what I said before. That is the best line in this episode. Like I mentioned, there's 2 balls in this adaptation, another page taken directly from Charles Perrault's story, so somebody clearly did their research. And there's a tiny detail that I didn't think much about initially, but it's actually genius. The messenger who brings the invitation specifically mentions that it's an autumn ball, which makes perfect sense if there's supposed to be pumpkins growing in Cinderella's garden at the time. When all's said and done, this is a pretty solid adaptation. It's enjoyable, though judging the script itself without the star-studded cast attached, I would argue it's not particularly memorable. And even then, your mileage may vary. But I will say this, so many moments in this thing are ripe with meme potential. And I think that alone earns it some points.
What's reality? Does anybody know?
Would you like something to drink? Perhaps some ham?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Name's Alfred. I'm very famous.
Can you wait until later, please?
Do you know anything about kissing?
Yes, I'm almost certain it has something to do with the lips.
That's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you can support the video by giving it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to the channel so you can be sure to see new episodes when they come out. And remember that no form of media is off limits here, so if you have a suggestion for a Cinderella thing that I should cover for a future episode, definitely leave me a comment and I will be sure it gets added to the list. But for now, I think I'm about to turn into a pumpkin, so I will see you next time. Bye!
We're going to take a little break now. But we'll be back really soon, ladies and gentlemen. So don't go away.